At the end of the day, it's all about freedom.
You've given much thought, Mr. Trump, if you're elected president and commander-in-chief, to that moment where you're going to have to make that first decision that puts American men and women in harm's way?
I think it's the most difficult decision you can possibly ever make. You're talking about death, and we're talking death to not just our side. We're talking death all over. I would be very, very cautious. I think I'd be a lot slower. She has a happy trigger. You look, she votes for the war.
But
she
have
goes
you
into
thought
Libya.
about personally the emotional burden of that moment?
I think it's a tremendous burden. I think there is no greater burden than anybody could have.
If you get past, the Make America Great Again and all this goofy stuff, it is pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible moment that, Donald. Okay, so the difference between Hillary Clinton when she says, "I won't be quick to send you to war," and then justifies all the other wars that she's fought, and you kind of go, well, you know what? If you weren't gonna say, after whatever, all the interventions that Bill Clinton had in the 90s, forget like Kosovo, and then just bombing the crap out of Iraq, one of the longest sustained bombing campaigns outside of a major war against Iraq, the sanctions that killed hundreds of thousands of people. So the whole Middle East is destroyed. That didn't stop her from being anti-war. Then coming in, voting for the war in Afghanistan, voting for the war in Iraq, that didn't stop her from being anti-war. But then voting for the war for Libya, that didn't stop her from being. Then she'll defend the war in Libya, but now somehow she's like, no, but I'm anti-war now. Or do I trust Trump, somebody who's never sent anybody to die in war, who's going no, I will not carelessly send people to go fight and die in war.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there's something fascinating. There's a couple things that are fascinating to me. Number one, the fact that Donald Trump, and it shows you where Trump is different than anything else that we've ever seen. Donald Trump is the Republican candidate pointing at the Democrat and saying she will be more likely to send people to go fight and die in war than I will. She's trigger happy. That was the word he used last time. But she's, the message basically is she's trigger happy with war. I've never in my life seen the Republican candidate run as the more anti-war candidate than the Democratic candidate. It's always the opposite. And that's just in itself a very interesting dynamic change. That this one guy broke open the whole system of Republicans being the defense, war hawks, and Democrats being the doves.
Times are changing.
The whole thing was always that Republicans are the national security, big military, strong, impose our will on the world, make the world safe, and then the Democrats were the ones who would talk in a more dovish way but still wanted to rule the world and would still quietly support all those wars. So they'd be like, no, but we have to make a global community and fight humanitarian wars, and I will vote for the war in Iraq, but let's do it for humanitarian reasons. So they'd be just as pro-war, but they'd talk a little more anti-war, hippie-ish language.
Yeah, that's right.
But now one Republican's just going, no, cut your hippie language. You're pro-war. I'm not that pro-war.
Yeah.
And there's something pretty fascinating about that dynamic.
And Hillary Clinton's rhetoric as well, talking about the shift between being more kind of hawkish or whatever, more kind of Republican-ish rhetoric, where she says, not one American died. She's using this nationalist kind of. And Trump says, not just our guys, but death all around.
That's the second
death
thing I
all
wanted to say
around.
about it. It was so fascinating.
Yeah.